Alrighty, good evening. I think we'll wait a minute or two just to make sure that everybody who wants to join in can, but we'll start in about 1 minute. Alrighty, well, it might be a bit of an intimate conversation this evening as we only have one participant, but that's okay. We're super happy to have you. So my name is Caitlin Fader. I am with the Regional District of Nanaimo. I'm the Emergency Planning Coordinator. And I'm here tonight with Matt Shields, who is the Senior Forester on our project. And he's been the one that's been writing all of our community wildfire resiliency plans for each of the electoral areas in the regional district. So the way tonight will go is Matt's going to run a presentation. And then if you have any questions after our presentation, we are more than happy to answer them for you. We will be recording this presentation and it will be made available on our Get Involved pages following this event. So with that, Matt, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks very much, Caitlin, and thank you for joining us tonight. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that our project takes place on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Snuneymuxw, Snuneymuxw, Qualicum, and relations. And I also wanted to mention that I'm joining tonight from the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh in Vancouver. So a little agenda for the presentation. The presentation should take about 30-35 minutes to go through. First, I'm going to give you a brief refresher on what a community wildfire resiliency plan is, if you happen to miss our meeting in August. Then I'm going to talk about our findings on fire risk in your area, Electoral Area E. I can drop off my video, Caitlin. Seems like I might be having some connection issues, so hopefully my voice is coming through clear. That's right. The second part of the presentation, we'll be talking about the wildfire risk findings. And then the third part of the presentation is me talking about how the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan can support FireSmart and what actions and recommendations are likely to be the most important based on your community's context. So here we go. What is a Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan anyways? Well, these are plans that are adopted by local government, in this case, the Regional District of Nanaimo, and they do two things. They map wildfire risk around communities, and they propose recommendations to reduce that risk. And these plans are paid for through the provincial government, and what you get at the end is a high-level strategy for managing wildfire risk in your community in the form of a document accepted by the Regional District Board. It looks something like this. I'm showing you excerpts from a community wildfire plan recently completed by my company, Diamond Head Consulting, on the Sunshine Coast. So these plans are meant to be read by the public and will place wildfire risk in your area in the context of your local landscape, your community's values, and other background info. And the plans are also meant to be read by decision makers in your community because they provide strategic advice on how the regional district can manage wildfire risk. So think of the plan as a first step towards building a fire smart community. It leaves lots of room for the regional district to tailor risk management to local circumstances and interests, and acts as a key to more provincial funding for fire risk management. So a little word on how we make one of these things. Well, it starts with a background review of your community's context, including its weather, fire history, its environment, cultural values, and the like. Then we make site visits around your community, mainly to public parks and other lands to assess potential wildfire behavior, confirm provincial data, and look at public infrastructure. Then we conduct analysis. So we use a mapping software to model wildfire risk on public lands using the data we've collected. And lastly, we make those recommendations. And we're still at the point where we're developing recommendations in this project. So if you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, feel free to share them with us during the question and answer, or get in touch with us online after the presentation. So I'm going to cover some of the background info in the plans. I don't have time to go through all of the material that'll be in there, but it includes population and area statistics, growth trends, descriptions of parks, your environment and the natural landscape, and climate and weather, including climate change. So Electoral Area E is a community built on hills overlooking the ocean. But behind these ocean views are extensive forests. And this means that almost all of us live within an area called the wildland-urban interface. And that wildland-urban interface is the area mapped in orange on the map. It's determined by the province and forms a buffer around areas of higher population. So the wildland-urban interface is really important for managing wildfire risk because, firstly, it's where most people live and most infrastructure is located. Secondly, it's where homes directly meet forest vegetation. And thirdly, it's where there are the most sources of ignition. So another piece of background that I want to bring to your attention is the recent fire history of this area. So we know that fire is part of the ecological history of most coniferous forests in North America. And before colonial settlement, large natural fires may have occurred as frequently as once every 150 to 200 years in our area. And fire was also extensively used by indigenous people along the coast to create open meadows for root crops like camas and forage for game. So pre-colonial fire history is an area of active research. For our project, we looked more closely at where locals have told us fires have occurred and also at data maintained by the BC Wildfire Service. And this map is showing two pieces of that data from the Provincial Wildfire Service. So the first are those pink polygons or shapes, and these represent larger fires in the province's database, typically larger than 1 hectare in size or 100 meters by 100 meters. These records are available from 1919 to 2020, so the last 100 years. And during this time period, only 4 larger fires have occurred in the electoral area, and they all occurred before 1940. So the second piece of data are those red dots. And these red dots are showing the province's data on smaller fire starts between 1950 and 2020, so the last 70 years. And during this period, there were 269 fire starts reported to the BC Wildfire Service. And of these, 162 spread to surrounding vegetation and had to be actively fought by firefighters. There's been a declining number of fires per decade at the same time as the number of reports of nuisance fires, so-called, that's fires that don't threaten property or vegetation, have increased. So the long story short on this slide is there have been no large fires since before 1940, and ignitions in recent decades are mostly small fires that were quickly suppressed or burned out due to unfavorable conditions. And these are indications that local firefighters are doing a good job of fire suppression, as well as advocating for fire safety. It also may reflect change in our community itself, as area has been deforested for agriculture and residential development over time. So, another piece of the background info, climate change. As we know, global greenhouse gas emissions are causing changes in the Earth's atmosphere. And around Western North America, research has shown an increasing fire season length on average. In our region, observed and predicted climate change show we may have hotter, drier weather in the summer and for a longer part of the year. Rainfall is predicted to increase in winter, spring, and fall, and may increase slightly in summer, but likely not enough to offset the effect of warmer temperatures. These changes are likely to support increased wildfire activity. However, in a particular year, fire potential is strongly influenced by the weather we receive, which is difficult for models of climate change to predict. So we can't be certain what the future will look like. In particular, precipitation volumes and distribution have large effects on fire season weather, and these outputs are some of the least certain from standard climate models. Another piece of information we can consider is past climate change. We know that our region has had warm and cold periods since the end of the last ice age. During warm periods, charcoal records show fire was a more regular occurrence than it is now. Overall, we should acknowledge that risk may increase over time. And this is one reason that community wildfire planning is a cyclical process meant to be repeated as communities and forests change. So there's one last piece of context I want to go over before we jump into the risk analysis. And that is land ownership. So the blacked out areas on this map are private land. And as you can see, the majority of our communities are privately owned, and public land is a minority. So under the terms of our project's funding, we don't assess wildfire threat on private land because of privacy concerns. And during our site visits, we look only at public land. So in the next section of the presentation on wildfire risk, we'll only show risk on public land. But because we know much of the private land on the island is forested, it's important to recognize that wildfire risk doesn't stop at a parcel boundary. So the abundance of private land in our community should affect how we respond to wildfire risk. Okay, so our site visits had a couple of purposes. The first was to visit forests in the vicinity of homes and communities and make wildfire threat assessments there. And I'll talk more about this in just a second. The second was to visit pieces of infrastructure that could be important for emergency response, like fire halls, water infrastructure, and communications towers. And the third was to see a wide variety of areas to understand the form of development in different neighborhoods. Let's talk more about those wildfire threat assessments. So the wildfire threat assessment process. Wildfire threat in wildfire threat assessments refers to the potential of a forest to ignite. Wildfire threat combines three elements. The first is forest fuels. The second is weather during the fire season. And the third is topography, because these are the primary factors that control natural fire behavior. Wildfire threat is rated for different forests as low to extreme. You can think of wildfire threat as being something like a rating of flammability. The threat ratings don't specifically take into account the likelihood of ignition. All forests, whether low or extreme, require a spark before they burn in a wildfire. So the relationship between topography, weather, and fire is fairly straightforward. Steeper forested slopes allow more rapid fire spread and intense fire behavior because of the simple fact that hot air rises. Fire at the bottom of a slope is preheating the forest above it, evaporating moisture from the forest and licking further up into tree crowns as it gets a leg up from the slope. For weather, the longer a hot, dry period, the easier it is for a fire to start because more and more of the forest's moisture will have evaporated. Winds stoke fire like a bellows and can lead to rapid fire growth. The best weather conditions for a fire to start are on a breezy day at the end of a long, hot drought. Forest fuels, on the other hand, are a bit more complicated. When we talk about forest fuels, we're simply talking about the wood, branches, leaves, needles, shrubs and herbs on the ground, and other growing things or biomass that can catch on fire and burn. So there are several traits that we use to characterize forest fuels, and you don't need to worry about writing these down. When making our threat assessments, we look at all of these common terms in our forest fuels glossary. These traits tend to vary at the scale of a forest stand, which is an area of similar forest cover, usually sharing a common origin, such as a wildfire or a windstorm. Concepts like surface fuel, ladder fuel, and crown fuel describe the different parts of a forest and their role during a wildfire. Fuel strata gap and crown closure tell us how far apart these pieces are. Measures of density like stems per hectare can be used to assess overall fuel volume, and tree species also influence fuel characteristics because coniferous trees are broadly more active during wildfire than deciduous ones. But the most important concept in our glossary to understand is the fuel type, that last one. So fuel types represent common patterns we see in the other forest fuel characteristics. Every forest in Canada can be described as one of 16 fuel types developed by the Canadian Forest Service. And in British Columbia, the BC Wildfire Service has adapted this system to describe our great diversity of forests. To help you think about fuel types, you just need 3 notes. So the first is coniferous trees and forests are more flammable than deciduous. The second is for conifers, denser forests are usually more flammable than less dense forests. And the third is forests with a lot of small, young trees are usually more flammable than forests with a lot of big, old trees. These rules are not absolute, but they give you the basics you need to start looking at forests and fire behavior around your community. So this map is showing you the most common fuel types around Electoral Area E. So in our community, we have several. And on this map, orange colors are showing areas that are dominated by coniferous forest. That's forests of Douglas fir, western red cedar, pine, and other species. So the C5 fuel type, so-called, shown in peachy orange, is the most common. This fuel type represents coniferous forests of moderate density, mostly made up of middle to old-aged trees, particularly Douglas fir. These forests are typically associated with moderate wildfire threat. Next, those shades of brown are showing you areas where vegetation is dominated by grass or other small plants. These areas are mostly old cut blocks that for one or another reason have not yet been reforested. Fire threat in these areas can vary. The other areas, shown in light pink and magenta, represent a mix of forests all containing at least 25% deciduous trees. These mixed or pure deciduous forests are often held to have reduced wildfire threat because of the lower number of conifers. Fire behavior in mixed wood stands can vary with the proportion of conifers and their distribution. So just now on that last slide, you heard me use the word typically to describe the relationship between wildfire threat and fuel type. This is because variability within forests, topography, and the effects of weather all combine to make wildfire threat. You'll recall that wildfire threat is kind of a probability that tells us how severe a fire could be during a typical fire season weather. Fire rank, on the other hand, is a visual classification that's used by the BC Wildfire Service to help illustrate the kinds of fire that can occur. So the higher the fire rank, the less predictable, faster spreading, and more dangerous the wildfire. Beyond rank 3, fires are often too difficult to directly fight with ground crews and must be extinguished by air support or favorable weather. The likelihood of higher rank fires tends to increase with more flammable fuel types and more extreme fire weather. One way of thinking about this is that it's easier, so to speak, for an area of high or extreme wildfire threat to sustain a fire of higher rank. Despite this, fire of any rank in the interface is capable of threatening homes and public safety if uncontrolled. So to put that together, the wildland-urban interface is where wildfire threat becomes wildfire risk. And risk is when there's something of value that could burn down because of a wildfire. So how does wildfire threat become wildfire risk exactly? Well, fires have 3 ways of spreading from forests into communities. The first is direct flame. This is when your home is exposed to wildfire by the ignition of its landscaping, yard debris, or other things you have stacked up around the building because of their proximity to forest vegetation. The second is radiant heat. So a fire front can generate a lot of energy. And if your home is within 10 to 30 meters of a forest on fire, the heat from the blaze can be enough to cause materials on your home to ignite. The greatest risk of this occurring is within 10 meters of your home. And the third is embers. So a fire can send off embers or firebrands that ignite flammable materials well in advance of the fire's arrival. Embers can lodge in crevices in your roof or siding, or ignite landscaping near your home. And while embers can travel up to several kilometers ahead of a fire, the greatest risk is within a few hundred meters of a burning forest. So when forests with higher wildfire threat ratings are within a few hundred meters of homes, we recognize higher fire risk. So to make this map, we combined that weather, fuels, and topographic information on wildfire threat with information on the location of homes in the interface to come up with a new map of wildfire threat and high-risk areas. So to look at this map, all you need to understand is the color scheme. So The black areas, as we discussed, are private land where we can't show wildfire risk. Light blue is areas of very low risk, which are typically water, as I'm sure you can recognize the outline of your community. Light yellow, where you see it, is areas of low risk. That neon yellow color that occupies most of the map is moderate. Orange is high, and red is extreme. And wherever you see a hash, the diagonal lines, that indicates an area of higher wildfire threat, so an orange or red area that is close to homes. And these are areas of relatively high risk. So on public lands in our electoral area, the areas of high wildfire risk are typically caused by topography. You can see that most areas of public land have moderate wildfire threat and risk. And the few areas of higher wildfire threat in those orange and red colors are scattered around the map and discontinuous from each other. So most of these areas, particularly the orange, are where conifer forests are located on steep slopes. And so they simply represent where the slope is so steep that it could accelerate fire behavior. There is an area of extreme wildfire threat in that red color located on Crown land south of Moorcroft Park. To harken back to the fuel map, recall that this area corresponds to an area which is considered recently harvested, or so-called slash, in the province's fuel type database. So these areas have to meet standards for fire hazard abatement within 1 year of harvest or sometimes sooner, which reduces fuel loads. And for this reason, wildfire threat in these areas is often overrated. So for this area in particular, we used a drone to observe it from the air and didn't see fuel loading that would justify this extreme rating. So to sum up some takeaways from the risk analysis, the first is that moderate threat is typical on public lands. And what does that mean? Moderate risk means that many people live in communities where wildfire is possible during extreme fire weather conditions, even if the highest ranked fires are unlikely. A second takeaway is that private land fragments the forest landscape, making it difficult to gain a complete picture of the risk environment. And the third is that areas of high risk on public land, those orange splashes, are primarily driven by small areas of steep slopes. And while fuel types do produce an area of extreme wildfire threat near Moorcroft Park, this small area is likely a poor representation of actual fire potential. Hazard abatement is effectively mandatory fuel management for forest licensees in recently harvested cut blocks. To cap this off of this discussion, I think it's good to remember that just because something is low risk doesn't mean that fire could never happen there. And likewise, just because an area is extreme risk doesn't mean that fire will definitely happen there. Fires require ignitions, favorable weather, and fuel. And risk reflects probability, not certainty. In the interface, almost everyone can benefit from thinking about fire smart if they haven't already. So now that we've talked about wildfire risk in your community, let's talk about what we could do to prepare. So the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan will make recommendations for the regional district to manage wildfire risk in Electoral Area E. And recommendations will follow the 7 disciplines of Fire Smart, which are listed on the slide. In the next 4 slides, I pulled out some high-level ideas that we're considering for the plans in your area, and I've split them into education, community planning and development, emergency response, and fuel management topics for ease of use. Most of these actions are eligible for additional provincial funding if supported by the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. So education. Public education and outreach play a critical role in helping communities prepare for wildfire by promoting a sense of empowerment and shared responsibility. And recommendations in this section will focus on what the RDN can do to improve awareness of wildfire in your community and increase resources and participation in Fire Smart by members of the public. The plan will aim to align the regional district with good outreach and organizing around fire prevention already happening in your community. For example, currently, the Nanoose Bay Fire Department has been liaising with community members around the electoral area about prevention and preparedness and has coordinated community Fire Smart days to share information about appropriate landscape and home maintenance in the interface. The regional district could investigate ways to assist the fire department with these efforts, perhaps by coordinating a joint grant application for a new Fire Smart coordinator role to act as a primary contact for Fire Smart home assessments. Another thing the regional district could do is, in its local parks, install wildfire awareness signage or educational material. At popular park locations like Moorcroft or the beach accesses, the the regional district has high traffic, high visibility locations where people are already going to think about forests. And these are good opportunities to connect the dots between forest and fire with some educational material that people can read at their leisure. Another way that the regional district could promote wildfire awareness is by working with the fire department to organize a community cleanup day for wildfire preparedness, typically focused on cleaning up of a smaller high-use park or public facility. These community preparedness days are great opportunities to demonstrate fire-smart landscaping principles to local residents, who get hands-on experience identifying and removing problem vegetation. Opportunities for this kind of initiative include the smaller, higher-use community parks scattered throughout the neighborhoods. Community planning and development. So recommendations in this area address how the regional district conducts its own business, including park and infrastructure management. The regional district could initiate several changes to how communities are planned, ranging from making sure large development proposals are reviewed by local fire departments to large public processes to revise the official community plan. A good place to start may be by ensuring fire-smart information goes out with every development application. To begin to understand the risk on private land, the regional district could work to incorporate wildfire hazard assessments as required information for large development approvals in interface areas. In the future, and with public support, the regional district of Nanaimo might be able to update subdivision and development rules so that fire-smart building is prioritized. The regional district might also be able to influence wildfire risk in the electoral area through its park management. For example, by adopting internal policies to make sure parks, regional district property, and RDN's facilities are being constructed and maintained with fire-smart materials and landscaping. For new parkland or property acquisitions, the regional district could adopt a policy to assess wildfire hazard at or before the time of acquisition. The regional district can also access additional money to conduct fire-smart assessments of its critical infrastructure. We've also heard that community members who want to fire-smart their properties are looking for a way to dispose of waste material. So the regional district may be able to access additional funding for this purpose. The Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan will likely recommend that the regional district staff develop a costed plan for a community chipping day and reduce or remove tipping fees on green waste from properties with a completed fire-smart hazard assessment at the regional transfer station. So, enhancing emergency response. Recommendations in this topic area address how the regional district can integrate wildfire risk into its internal emergency preparedness, while also working with a broad range of community actors. So the regional district can lead and continue to lead the update of emergency and evacuation plans, ensuring that each are adequate for community and neighborhood size. And internal policy can promote review of the plans when new large developments take place. In the long term, the regional district can plan strategically for secondary access to single access neighborhoods south of Highway 19, such as on Matthew and Morello roads. There may be potential to obtain right-of-ways for such routes through future subdivision. And the regional district can also continue to liaise with local firefighters. During this project, we heard that firefighters are interested in seeing additional capacity for fire-smart education, as well as enhancements to the regional district's bylaw enforcement. An issue with the previous burning bylaw in the community was that the fire department was getting called out unnecessarily too often. The regional district can work with the fire department internally to develop a strategy for reducing nuisance calls, which may involve a public awareness campaign under the education discipline. The regional district can also bring more voices to the table by establishing a working group with local fire departments, the BC Wildfire Service, the region's Parks Department, and BC Parks representatives to address priority fuel management projects and potential joint training exercises. So lastly, this topic area addresses fuel management. And in some areas on public land, it may make sense to pursue fuel management. So what is fuel management? It's when a professional forester makes detailed site assessments of fuel loading in an area and develops a prescription to reduce components of the forest that are creating risk. These assessments are more detailed and intensive than the data we collected for the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan and can be used to model fire behavior at specific sites. The photos on this slide show a post-treatment condition in Douglas fir forests similar to forests found in our area. The point being that in most cases, the purpose of fuel management is to keep a forest in place and not to clear cut it. The regional district is currently planning fuel management in the 707 Community Park on Gabriola Island. In that location, high-density conifer forest is contributing to high wildfire threat next to homes. You can find out more about this and similar projects on the regional district's Get Involved page where you registered for this event. It's critical to understand that fuel management typically targets smaller or dead trees, not large healthy ones. Fuel management is a tool that we can use in some situations to reduce the likelihood of fire spreading towards homes and improve the chances of suppression success. So the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan will identify potential treatment areas on the basis of their wildfire risk rating, site assessments, proximity to homes, and operational feasibility. Fuel management in your area is a lower priority than some other actions based on the findings of the risk analysis. So just to wrap up here, while the planning process is ongoing, you can submit questions and find more information at the RDN's Get Involved page for Wildfire Resiliency, where you registered for this event. That's getinvolved.rdn.ca. In the new year, we'll be having another event to present the highlights of this CWRP and the other 6 plans for each electoral area before they go to the regional board. And this event will be online, similar to this meeting. We're aiming to have the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan in place by February of next year, when they'll go before the Regional District Board in a public meeting. So that concludes the presentation part of the event. So we'll have time to take any question. And since it's just a small group tonight, no need to use the raise hand feature. If you have any questions, happy to answer them here with Caitlin. And yeah, Caitlin, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say before we dive in here.
No, I just wanted to round it out with our kind of project timeline. We are hoping to have our final drafts completed by the end of February, and it'll be going to the board of directors for their support, hopefully shortly after that. So it will be made publicly available once it has been kind of accepted by the board. But other than that, yeah, if you have any questions, fire away.
Considering I'm the only one, I think.
You are.
Yes. And we're so happy to have you.
Yeah, we know. Thank you for coming.
I think another natural disaster is currently on other people's minds, but we're glad you're here.
This is really interesting for me because I used to be. I have worked with Narcan, Natural Resources.
Yeah.
And as a trade commissioner for Canada in my past life. And I've also worked in the energy sector as strategy and change management.
Mm-hmm.
And my last job was BC Oil and Gas Commission as Director Strategic Analysis. It's an interesting time for my husband and I because we have a lot which now has an address from RDN in Fairwinds in the news.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're waiting for the permit, by the way. The building plans are all done and it's been with RDN for 6 months. But I understand that RDN doesn't have enough people to look at the plans. But at some point, I think it'll take 12 months once we get the permit. So whenever we get it, at the end of next year, we are going to move from Burnaby, where I am right now, to Fairwinds. And I have been pretty active with our neighbors around in our place. We are on Carmichael Road in Fairwinds. And we have a pretty strong group of neighbors in a good neighborhood where everyone's really conscientious. And I've attended with one of the neighbors had invited me for a video conference like this with the Fire Smart with the fire hall people in that area.
Yeah.
It was a very nice presentation. So I'm aware of what has been happening since the last year while I'm still in Burnaby. But Matt, it was very good recommendations. I am very impressed with the comprehensive list of recommendations you have, which is amazing. And I sincerely hope RDN applies all of that to these areas, because I know for sure in Fairwinds and a few people I know in the news, they're very conscientious and they're very, aware and very educated about all these things. So when you talked about education, I think it would go a long way if you really put up those notices and, give out these flyers or online or whatever method or all three, because many people may be older there and they don't really, maybe they're not very comfortable with the online only thing. Mm-hmm. But I think these recommendations you had were really comprehensive, concise, and very straightforward. So I was really impressed. I'm like, this is like getting everything to the point. So I hope RDN listens and does whatever you are saying. And yes, and if it, that education for when new houses, like our house is say going to be built. And I am aware of what is fire smart and stuff like that, but the Fairwinds has having a lot of construction activity going on, and it's a pretty popular area and becoming more popular. So I think education pre-house building is also a very important thing, rather than, say have roofs with a flammable, like we are having metal roof and hardy plank siding and stuff like that. But if you don't have these things, obviously in a forested area or not really forested, but with high growth, with many trees and coniferous trees and things there, it obviously becomes more more of a hazard, shall we say. So pre-house building, as you mentioned, as anyway, that I think that would go a long way to also make people even more aware than they are. And I have heard of instances when they had unnecessary calls for the fire hall, all our guys over there to come over, because people have been complaining between each other also that why is this open fires being done in summer when it shouldn't be done, and burning of brush and all sorts of things. So I understand all of that, but it's very good seminar, and I'm sorry there aren't other people today, but it's also given me a chance to interact.
Yeah. Well, we're glad we had you, and definitely receiving some of your messages, especially about that pre-building kind of information. I know we've spoken to our planning department about what opportunities we might have in the future to provide more of that information to residents, before they start building, or, while they're even designing their subdivision. So
exactly, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of architectural thing, like my husband and I were very particular on this fire thing, and we chose all the materials. But if there are, say, this makes the building obviously more expensive, right? A normal building would be, but we've done that for, because we are aware of it. But if there are possibilities where RDN can give subsidies of some order for fire smart methods, or like they have for energy efficiency and things like that, it doesn't go, it's not too much compared to a risk of a fire.
Yeah. So, and part of that really depends too on what is available with the funding streams that we have. So that is something that we have explored. Go ahead, Matt. Do you have something to chime in about that one?
Yeah, I do actually. So there's a pretty limited amount of money available through our grant program, Madhu, for rebates for kind of the retrofit work that you're talking about. And I haven't seen it applied directly to new construction before. However, I do agree with you that sort of getting things out in front of the development process is really important, and that in some communities where, to a certain extent, people are able to bear the cost a bit better, that it can be a really effective way to go. So to reiterate, like this plan is sort of that first step, as I mentioned at the start. So don't expect, like in the months after adoption, like a big reopening of the OCP or something like that. But the recommendations will be in there for looking at alternate means in the community development arena that the regional district can use to sort of improve landscape level fire risk as a whole. But also I'd like to point out, as you saw in the presentation, that overall the level of risk in your community, the community that you've chosen to live in the future, is moderate, which compared to other areas in the regional district is typical or slightly better than it looks in some other areas. So I think it's great that you have educated yourself and are informed about all of these issues, have selected those smart building materials like the metal roof and the hardy siding, and you'll be well prepared for, I think, whatever comes at you in that neighborhood. So just like a really, really great to talk to you about that.
You'll be a model home for all of the new development.
Yes, I know, yeah. Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, it's great to have houses like that in a neighborhood, because I think it really opens people's eyes to that, Fire Smart doesn't have to be unattractive or it doesn't have to be scary, I guess. So yeah, good on you for making those choices.
No, but you really need to like what we have, a very straight line, contemporary
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
It's not ostentatious under any circumstances, but it is pretty efficient and very straight lines, because it will take into account all the health, because my husband is a family physician as well. So so the health aspects as well as the my disaster management brain as it goes.
Yes.
But clearly it's worked well together, and you guys have like come up with this robust fire smart home, which is again, like I said, it is excellent. So I'm curious, have you contacted or been involved with any of the neighborhood emergency preparedness groups in the Fairwinds area?
I was sitting in Burnaby. I can't do very much, but yes, I get one of our neighbors to be is a person called Terry Kelly. And
Terry, I've met him a couple of times. He's excellent.
He's involved with CERO, right? CERO, the C's emergency response. So he and my husband and us, all of us. In fact, I told you I know many of my 2B neighbors. So I have attended with Terry. He keeps sending me whenever he has a bulletin or something like that. So the C's are pretty well prepared, and I know some people in the R's as well, in Rockhampton and all. So I think they're pretty aware. The people are pretty aware in that place. But with Matt's suggestions, I think it would go a long, long way. If you can add value to these people. And, when people are already aware and they have these recommendations and they have all that, then word spreads to other neighborhoods as well, right? So it's like an example to others.
Yeah,
so I think that would help a long way. It's not difficult to educate people in Fairwinds.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of people there that have a lot of capacity to receive information, which is awesome. And Terry is one of those examples. I've met with him, and he was a sponge for what I had to say, but I know that it's great to hear that he's already distributing that information to his neighbors to be, and so that's totally the stuff we love to hear. And so through a project like this, we're hoping to tap into that and make the best of communities that already have that great communication, so you can start educating each other, and then that gives us a different capacity to support you in different ways. So
because it becomes a model community, and it's easy for RDN to handle, any government to handle, and using the recommendations, and then you can use it as an example, as a model thing, which makes it simpler for people to really believe in something. And everything Fire Smart doesn't really make it. I mean, of course, it increases the expense a bit, but it's not that much more that, if a new house is being made, you might as well use these modern techniques. Like we've sort of roughed in for solar panels, and we've roughed in for an electric vehicle charger and stuff like that. We haven't put it on because we didn't think it was frankly economical to do that at this point in British Columbia, at least. So things like that we have roughed in, and at the right opportunity, all you have to do is that. Now, rough in doesn't cost so much, but it won't be very invasive. Like, for example, a simple thing like radon. Now, radon I'm aware of because I did geology with my work for oil and gas. And there are radon intensive areas on the island and in the North Shore here and stuff like that. But when I talk to, say, a realtor or a builder, they were like, no, it's not there. I'm like, excuse me, it's there. It's on every map if you look at the geology and stuff like that. But people are scared of accepting it. Now, all you have to do is put a radon mitigation thing. It's just a pipe and a blower when you're building a house, because once the house is built, then it becomes hard and it becomes much more expensive. So we even have that in place. We will be having that in place as well. So simple things, that's why when Matt said, pre-build stuff like that, which you can do for not only fire, for any of these small things, which are pretty meaningless when the house is being built. But you have to sort of explain it to the people who are really scared of accepting it, because I think they think the real real estate value will go down if they say there is radon.
Mhm.
But radon is there in stone and it's granite and it will be having fissures. So
Yeah.
it's like the obvious thing, but people are scared of accepting it.
Mhm.
So RDN suggestions or help saying that would be very useful, Caitlin, if you can take this sort of forward. And
Mhm.
if I can send you my email and we can chat further. But I think Matt had really, I really mean it. I was very impressed
Mhm.
because it was very clear. It wasn't like fuzzy or something which can't be implemented or things like that. So Matt, good job.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And I'd absolutely love to connect. You can fire me an
Yeah.
email. It's just kfader@rdn.bc.ca. I
One
think you
more.
can also just Google me.
Let me write it down somewhere.
Oh.
Yeah, what is it, Caitlin?
It's on the screen. Are you still screen sharing with us? Can you see it?
Oh,
It's might be tiny. It's kfader, Fader.
I've taken a screenshot.
Oh, perfect. There you go. Easy done. And you can even, if you just look at the regional district, the website that you registered on, my email is kind of like down on the bottom right-hand corner. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, my email and information is there.
No, I'll write to you on this email. I have it as a screenshot now.
Absolutely.
And connect, and it would be great fun to if any time we can have a further discussion or just a chat. And I would love to I'd love to be involved in these sort of things because I think this is very important.
Awesome. It might be a little bit before I get an initial email back to you, just because we are really inundated with flood stuff right now. So it might be a little bit, but yeah, I mean, if you ever have something that pops into your brain where you think, yeah, I need to share this with Caitlin or Matt or any of our emergency people, give me a holler. I love hearing from my residents because that means I know my message is getting out. So yeah, drop me a line any old time.
Yeah, and you can find me. I mean, Terry knows where to find me. So if you are in touch with Terry, that makes it easy as well.
Perfect.
So,
And you registered with an email on this, so I probably have access to that as well.
okay,
Yes.
great.
Thank you so much, Madhu. That was wonderful. It was great to have a conversation. Yeah, like I said, if you do have any of your soon-to-be neighbors that are interested in viewing this presentation, I'll post it on that Get Involved page, probably in a week or so. And they can have a look at it and watch our conversation and ask their own questions if they want to reach out to me.
Send it to Terry anyway, because he has everyone's email.
Yeah, I might actually connect with him directly
Yeah.
because I know he and I have chatted and we talked at the inception of this project.
Yeah, that would be easy because it will be faster getting around to everybody.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. I will do that. Anyway, we'll let you go, but thank you so much. It's been great.
No, it's been very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
All right.
Madhu.
Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.